These are the best non-medicated treatments that I use with my entrepreneur patients. The very first kind of treatment that I look into using is that I understand that entrepreneurs tend to have issues with a lot of different deficiencies. And so I will usually want to look into what are different micronutrient deficiencies that they might be suffering with, because it is a bigger problem than most people think, especially when it comes to entrepreneurs, because they burn themselves out significantly. And so they tend to have a lot of different micronutrient deficiencies. And some of the big ones that I usually like to look into is looking at all the different B vitamins, because a lot of those B vitamins can contribute to fatigue, burnout, mental fatigue, focus issues. I mean, you name it. So it's important to see if there's an issue with vitamin B12, vitamin B6, vitamin B3, folate, all of them. You want to make sure that there's no issues going on there. The other thing along with that, you want to see if iron levels are also low. Iron is very important because it does help make blood. It helps carry oxygen and nutrients to the brain. And so if there's issues there, you're going to have symptoms of brain fog. So it's really good to rule that in or rule that out as a possibility. Some other ones that are really important is to look at vitamin D, because that is very common amongst entrepreneurs because they tend to work indoors a lot, especially if you live in somewhere more in the north areas where you don't get as much sunlight. It's always important to look at that because that could be contributing to your fatigue situation. And then on top of that is also important to look at things like zinc and magnesium, because both of those are also tend to be deficient. And that does contribute to issues having high anxiety, focus issues, brain fog, sleep issues. So you want to make sure that is not an issue as well. A few other ones that I do like to look into, especially if you're having issues with memory, and it's a good way to kind of treat the memory issue, is if you are low in serine or choline, and that's good to test for those things. And then you would implement something like phosphatidylcholine and also phosphatidylserine, depending on what you are deficient in. So obviously the treatment would be is first testing to see what you're specifically deficient in, what micronutrients you're deficient in. And then once you identify what they are, then you supplement it. But over time, you do want to use food to replace it so you don't rely so much heavily on supplements. The second non-medicated treatment that I look into is also still doing more investigative work, doing lab work to understand why is this entrepreneur struggle with being focused or having low energy. They've reached this complete burnout state. And when that happens, I typically want to look into hormones, because hormones can impact someone's energy and focus drastically. And some of the big ones that I will definitely go to is one, testing for cortisol throughout the day to see if there is any dips or any spikes in someone's cortisol levels, because cortisol is what gives us energy. It also impacts our stress. And so depending on where it's at, I will typically incorporate something like adrenal desiccated if your cortisol levels are low. Now, if they're spiked, then I'll use something like ashwagandha or like rhodiola or even cortisol manager. Those things can help lower cortisol if it tends to be spiked. And typically when it will be spiked is going to be later in the day, but sometimes I've seen cortisol levels spike in the middle of the day, and that can definitely impact your focus and your productivity throughout the day as an entrepreneur. Some other really important key hormones to look out for is testing for thyroid. Thyroid definitely can be a big culprit to this, and this would be looking at TSH, looking at free T3, free T4, as well as anti-TPO levels. Now, why this is important? Because it can impact your energy and your focus. It can cause brain fog, it can cause heart palpitations, it can cause a lot of different issues, and you want to do a thorough workup of your thyroid, not just looking at just TSH, which a lot of your doctors might just do that. But as an entrepreneur, you want to make sure your levels are optimal. And so you want to check every one of those and just want to make sure they're in good standing. Now, if for some reason your thyroid levels are off, then you are going to want to get that treated. And I usually will recommend for people to look into with their prescribing doctor to look into like Nature Thyroid or MP Thyroid. But if you maybe are just maybe what they call subclinical thyroid issue, then you can use something called Thytrophin PMG, which is by standard process. I've used that a lot with my patients, and that tends to really help as well. And then a few ones to also note when it comes to certain hormones is testing for testosterone, estradiol, and estrogen, and also DHEA. All four of those are important because if any of them are low, it can impact your energy, it can impact your focus, and it can impact your mood. You just want to check them, make sure they're good. If they're not, then you want to treat them. Some of the things that I will use for women, especially if there's some issues with the hormones there, I'll use Simplex F. For males, if testosterone's low, I'll use Simplex M or also Testo Gain to improve some testosterone levels. And then if your DHEA levels are low, then I will usually typically recommend adding DGA. Now, the third heavy focus that I use as a non-medicated kind of treatment for my entrepreneur patients is fixing the gut. Gut is a very important thing when it comes to someone's overall health. If it's not working very adequately, then it's not going to feed the body, it's not going to feed the brain, and then you're going to have a lot of different issues to not keep up with all the demands of running your business. And so if you're dealing with things like IBS, gassing and bloating, indigestion, heartburn, any of that kind of stuff, there's definitely early signs that your digestive system is not working great, and therefore you're going to have symptoms of brain fog, fatigue, especially if you have things like candida overgrowth. It can cause those brain fog moments, and so you want to make sure you do fix the gut. And so typically, a lot of times you can fix this with probiotics or prebiotics, especially if you've taken antibiotics in the last 2 years. It usually will destroy the gut flora, so you want to make sure to replenish that with probiotics and prebiotics. But there's other things that need to usually be addressed, and typically that might be some pancreatic enzymes. It also might be that you're having a hard time breaking down your foods because your stomach acidity is not high enough to breaking it down. So using like betaine, HCl, just depend how bad your stomach acidity is. But a big one is really just incorporating really good foods. If you really just clean up your diet and start incorporating more fibrous foods, more high vegetables, clean proteins, more healthier fats, and getting rid of the carbs, because carbs can really kind of back you up and make you more constipated. It can cause some disruption in the gut flora. So it's definitely important to kind of balance your diet. You'll find that that can improve your gut significantly. And the fourth non-medicated treatment that I like using is fasting, especially if you do need to fix up your gut. Fasting is really a great way to give your digestive system a break and to actually get rid of old toxic things and junk out of your system. But it also does get rid of old dying cells known as autophagy. It breaks down those cells, gets rid of them, and then that creates room for stem cell regeneration, which there's a lot of benefits of that, because who doesn't want new cells recycling throughout your body to be able to increase more stem cells for your brain, for your body, your different organs? Definitely are going to want that for longevity purposes. And it's great for entrepreneurs to be on their A game when they can constantly incorporate something like fasting. Now, you do need to build up to this. So you might start with 16-8. So you fast 16 hours a day and then eat it in an 8-hour window. If you get up to a 24-hour fast, maybe once a week, and then build it up to 36-hour fast once or twice a week. That's what I like doing, because there's a lot of benefits when you finally get past the 24-hour mark, because you can get into autophagy and you could also get into ketosis. Now, the fifth one that's pretty self-explanatory, but I can't stress it enough, is using sleep and exercise as also medicine. If you are consistent with exercising every day, or at least 5 days out of the week, and getting good night's sleep, you will find that your brain is going to work at its peak performance all the time. And you need to put this as a high priority. I always have to put it as a high priority as an entrepreneur running my own business, because if I don't, I tend to either get some headaches, I have brain fog, and then I am not going to be very productive that day. So I have to put this as a priority. Otherwise, I become a bottleneck to my business, and so does my patients and clients that don't put sleep and exercise as a priority. Now, the sixth thing is you could be incorporating all these great things, but a lot of times if you have stressors in your life, it's like a roadblock. You could be implementing all the good foods, the supplements, exercises, all of this. But if you're highly stressed, it's very hard for your body to allow it to heal. And so it's important to identify what is causing you stress. Is there certain relationships, or are there certain employees that you have that are causing you stress that you might need to get rid of, or customers? Whatever it is, you do need to identify these stressors and how can you resolve it. It might be also within your marriage or different relationships. You definitely need to resolve these things, because if you don't, it doesn't matter what you implement, you're going to find hard to heal, because that stressor is a roadblock. So if you can start identifying it and eliminating it, that does help drastically. Now, I mentioned a lot of different supplements here. Now, the reason why these supplements might work is because they're specific of what you've identified. Like I was saying before, that you actually did some lab testing to identify what is the root cause of the problem. And so over time, as you're implementing supplements, you need to be incorporating food and lifestyle changes and use that more as your medicine and not reliant on the supplements. But it all starts with investigating, understanding what is the root causes of these different issues. And so you should watch this video next, where I talk about the critical labs that all my entrepreneur patients should be taking. And so you should watch this next if you really want to know what those labs are.